When we started writing Elden Ring lore videos, it was to share the experience of digging through this game with the help of the community. Our first big exploration was the Crucible Knights, and thanks to that video, our channel received a significant signal boost from YouTube, and because of that, we reached so many new viewers and received so many comments that the video itself now feels deeply incomplete. With that in mind, we wanted to do something special for our 50th episode of Elden Lore by going back to the Crucible Knights and incorporating all of the findings made through our community, presenting a more comprehensive picture of these enemies and their place in the lands between. We're going to call out various commenters through the video that helped to flesh out this picture, but given the vast amount of comments that video received, we obviously can't mention everyone. With that said, if you've ever watched or commented on that original video, thank you. Square Table Gaming would not be where it is now without that initial boost, and you are the reason we do what we do. Now let's explore the Crucible Knights again, with a stronger understanding of their place within the lore of Elden Ring. In order to gain a basic understanding of the Crucible Knights, we can look toward the various armors, weapons, and incantations associated with them. The Crucible Axe armor is described as the armor of the Crucible Knights who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, worn by the knight Ordovis and his men, or Siluria, depending on whose armor you're looking at. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree, strengthens aspects of the Crucible incantations. While this is a fairly succinct explanation of who the knights were, there's a missing detail from Elden Ring's beta telling us that there were only ever 16 Crucible Knights in the world. This shows what an elite force they were in the lands between. While their armor tells us who they were, their gauntlets provide a little history. In time, the strength shown by these knights, and even their appearance, was seen as chaotic and deserving of scorn. So while they were likely praised in their early days, fighting alongside the first Elden Lord himself, over time they were made outcasts, likely because of their connection to the primordial crucible. We need only look to the Crucible Knot talisman to explain why this connection would cause them such trouble. A talisman fashioned from a bony knot that embodies aspects of various creatures, said to have grown on the human body long ago, a vestige of the crucible of primordial life. Born partially of devolution, it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but it is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. All three of the aspects of the crucible incantations we can find provide the same piece of lore. This is a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial crucible, where all life was once blended together. Knowing these are the powers wielded by the Crucible Knights, it's made clear that their name is literal. They are connected to this ancient power, much the same way omens are. Omens are considered touched by the Crucible, and for that they are shunned by society, having their horns removed at birth, which kills most of them. Those that survive are hidden underground or used as muscle, and are hunted by the Omen hunters. Even the children of Marika born Omen, Morgott and Mohg, were locked away beneath the city until they each took up arms for their own missions. To put it simply, anything associated with the primordial crucible is now despised in the lands between, which is why we find the Crucible Knights scattered across the lands, fighting under different banners, no longer an elite force, but disgraced warriors taking up arms for their own reasons. As we mentioned, there were 16 Crucible Knights in their order before Godfrey was banished from the lands between and his forces were dissolved. In our original video on the Crucible Knights, we had discovered 14 of these warriors in-game, but through the help of the community, we not only identified 2 knights we had listed that were nothing more than ghosts of player characters, but found the missing 4 knights throughout the lands between. Moving forward, we're going to take a look at all 16 Crucible Knights, where they were found in the world, and what their location may say about their story after their order was disbanded. The first Crucible Knight most of us encountered while playing Elden Ring was actually found within an Ever jail. Notice how I'm putting emphasis on jail, as many in the community left comments calling us out on our mispronunciation of Everjail as Evergal. We've learned our lesson, we promise. Anyway, the Crucible Knight locked in this Everjail is likely our first encounter with these enemies, and can be devastatingly difficult for new players. Like many of the knights we find, there's no real context given for why they are located here, trapped forever in their jail. But we theorize that this particular knight may have fought back against the banishment of Lord Godfrey. What better way to disband the Crucible Knights and break their spirits than to magically lock away any member of their order who questioned their treatment of the first Elden Lord. There is a Crucible Knight found on the Rampart Tower cliff in Stormvale Castle, and his presence here can seem a bit jarring. However, the context around Godric the Grafted could provide some clues as to his allegiance. As we know, Godric surrounded himself with the strongest forces he could find. The actual soldiers of Godric only defend the land around his castle, but once inside, we face exiled knights, banished knights, grafted forces, omen, eagles, lions, and even a troll. It would make sense that Godric would seek out a Crucible Knight to add to his ranks. This knight, however, seems to protect an area of the castle one would rarely find themselves in. It's possible that this knight felt some sense of duty to work under Godric, given his likely lineage to Godwyn, son of Godfrey, but that sense of duty would only take him so far. Choosing to defend an area of the castle far from his liege, who he likely saw for what he was, a far cry from worthy of his place amongst the demigods. When visiting the 4 belfries, we can enter a portal that takes us to Nokron, where we see a Crucible Knight staring off into the sky of this underground land. We originally thought that this knight simply stood on this destroyed bridge because he was trapped. Without grace to allow free movement around the land, there was no way for them to leave this spot. However, as commenter Adele Grief pointed out, they aren't just staring into the void. This knight is looking at Mohg's castle. Perhaps he keeps watch over Mohg, the son of his Lord Godfrey, but chooses to do it from afar so as to keep themselves separated from his worship of the Formless Mother. Or perhaps it's the opposite. Maybe this knight seeks to find a way to Mohg's palace to end the heresy of his former liege's offspring. 2 Crucible Knights can be found in another area of Nokron. When traveling to the Waterfall Basin, we encounter a knight wielding a spear, and another wielding a sword. These knights seem to be defending the area ahead, and we think we know why. Just past them we can find Dee, Beholder of the Dead, a man whose brother is dedicated to ending those who live in death. While he himself takes up that cause upon his brother's death, perhaps these knights were acting as wardens to keep Dee from heading deeper into the basin. Why would they be doing this? Because if you follow the basin, you can make your way to the resting place of Godwyn the Golden's remains. Godwyn was the Golden's son, the only one of Godfrey's children not to be born an omen, and we believe it well within the realm of possibility that these knights may have taken up the task of defending him. While they couldn't save him in life, they could at least defend his corpse from being disturbed after his death. Interestingly, another knight can be found in the Deeproot Depths, and we'll be discussing her next. As we make our way through the depths, we can find an old tree, possibly the remains of a minor Erd tree from long ago, and standing guard over it is Crucible Knight Siluria. She is the only named Crucible Knight wearing the Crucible Tree armor, and upon her defeat, she drops the great spear, Siluria's Tree. The description of this weapon tells us it is the weapon of one of the 2 honored as foremost among the Crucible Knights. The primordial form of the Erd tree is close in nature to life itself, and this spear, modeled on its crucible, is imbued with its ancient holy essence. Given that she is known as one of the 2 honored as foremost in their order, we believe it's likely Siluria led the Crucible Tree Knights, while another led the Crucible Axe Knights. As for her purpose here, we believe she, like the 2 knights defending the basin, was a last line of defense against those who would desecrate the corpse of Godwyn the Golden. It is also worth noting that just beyond Siluria, within the husk of the tree she was stationed in front of, we can find the Crucible Tree Knight armor set. Perhaps this armor belonged to another of their order, one who has already died by the time we enter the Lands Between, but who we can still face in battle. If we make our way through the Road's End catacombs, we face a spirit caller snail. These snails are able to call on spirits from beyond the grave to fight on their behalf. As long as we don't kill it too quickly, it can summon both a Crucible Axe Knight and a Crucible Tree Knight. Even if we never encounter any Crucible Knights before this point, it can still summon these enemies. This tells us that at least 2 Crucible Knights have died before we made our way to the Lands Between, accounting for 2 more of the overall 16. This also helps us account for the Tree Knight armor found behind Siluria. Thanks to the Nexus for calling this detail out in the comments of our original video. Another Crucible Knight can be fought alongside a misbegotten warrior near the Redmane Castle festival ground. We believe this knight cares only for battle, which would explain why he made his way to Caelid after Godfrey's exile. This area of Caelid draws strong warriors to compete, so they likely found their purpose in fighting alongside the misbegotten warrior against any who would challenge them. While others in the Lands Between would refuse to fight alongside this beast, a Crucible Knight would see no issue with having a misbegotten as a battle companion. They both draw their strength from the primordial crucible, and they both thirst for victory. In Leyndell, we are able to face 2 different Crucible Knights while exploring the city. We believe these knights may have chosen to swear their fidelity to Marika after their lord was banished, which would explain their presence in the royal capital. One of these knights is found standing over a long dead corpse, which has a hero's rune lying on top of it. Notably, they also appear to be staring at an ornate depiction of the Erd Tree. Another is found patrolling the area around Grandsack's Bolt. These knights are both found without many other soldiers around them, perhaps being left to their own devices, as others in Marika's forces disdain their primordial power. Another 2 Crucible Knights can be found in crumbling Farum Azula. Neither of these were mentioned in our original video, so thank you to Core54 and Angel Down for being the first 2 commenters to call them out to us. One of these knights can be found alongside the corpse of a dragon, while the other can be found fighting against beastmen. We believe the origins of these knights can be traced back to Godfrey's battle with Dragon Lord Placidusax. At some point in the past, we know this battle took place, with Godfrey defeating the Dragon Lord and leaving him gravely injured. So it would make sense that he would have taken his elite knights into battle with him during his march on Farum Azula. What if 2 of his knights were left behind to ensure no one disturbed this place after their victory? This would explain why one of them is found embroiled in battle, while another stands over the remains of a slain dragon, an enemy he likely defeated with his comrades years ago. It's possible these knights have no idea their lord was banished. They're simply continuing to follow their orders to this day. After making our way through the Oriza hero's grave, we can come face to face with another named Crucible Knight, Ordovis. He fights alongside another knight, and upon defeating them both, we receive the Crucible Axe set and Ordovis' greatsword. This sword is identical to those carried by all of the sword-wielding Crucible Knights, and its item description sheds light on Ordovis' place in their order. Greatsword of Ordovis, one of the 2 honored as foremost among the Crucible Knights. This sword is imbued with an ancient holy essence. Its red tint exemplifies the nature of primordial gold, said to be close in nature to life itself. Knowing that the axe armor is said to be worn by Ordovis' men, and the tree armor is said to be worn by Siluria's men, we know that these 2 were likely the commanders of the Crucible Knights under Godfrey. Ordovis' greatsword also talks about the red tint of primordial gold, which is not mentioned anywhere else in Elden Ring. By saying it's close in nature to life itself, perhaps it's implying that the brilliant gold of the Erd Tree may be an abnormality, removed from how life should be in the Lands Between. When it comes to why Ordovis chose to remain in the Oriza's hero grave, we can't say definitively. But if we had to guess, we'd say he was likely placed there by Godfrey, and given the aid of a Crucible Tree Knight by Siluria. The last Crucible Knight we have to discuss is my personal favorite. When we reach the Volcano Manor, we can speak with Lady Tanith, and behind her stands a Crucible Axe Knight that has clearly sworn his allegiance to the manor. Known as Tanith's Knight, this warrior seems to have thrown off his title as a Crucible Knight, and now works in service of the matriarch of Volcano Manor. It seems his path led him to turn his back on the Golden Order entirely after Godfrey's exile, and he found his purpose as part of Rykard's inner circle. We believe this knight is the only one of their order who chose to fight back against those who deemed them nothing more than creatures to be disdained due to their very nature. We believe he was appointed by Rykard to defend Tanith, which explains why the only way for us to meet him in battle is to kill Tanith while she feasts on Rykard's remains. Ultimately, we believe he wanted to see Rykard destroy the other demigods as revenge for his exiled lord. As an aside, another fun bit of lore that we believe is now common knowledge was first brought to our attention by Lieutenant Cedar Xander. Both Ordovis and Siluria are named after real-life time periods, the Ordovician and the Silurian, both of which took place hundreds of millions of years ago. It's a fun tie-in to the idea that the primordial crucible existed long before the time of the Erdtree, and speaks to just how ancient the power wielded by these knights truly is. There we have it, a definitive list outlining all 16 Crucible Knights that can be found throughout Elden Ring. While some claim that the description calling out the 16 knights should no longer be considered canon due to its removal from the armor set after the closed beta, we believe it's no coincidence that we can account for each of these knights in-game. Of course, we could always find new Crucible Knights in future DLCs that would lend credence to the idea that we should ignore that number. Unless, of course, we're dealing with a world within a dream, which I still think is a real possibility. So what did you think of this revamped exploration of the Crucible Knights? Let us know in the comments how you feel about our dissection of each knight. Like and subscribe so you never miss another lore dive. Thank you so much for joining us for our 50th episode in this series. We sincerely appreciate every single one of you. We'll see you next time for more Elden Lore.